it's Mo. I've been wanting to go through the series that I'm currently reading for a while and see how many I'm actually reading, how many I'm in the middle of, how many I've completed since starting BookTube. And I made a video like this a couple of years ago where I just named some series off the top of my head. They were series that I was working on and I wanted to continue. But in this video, I decided to go through all the years that I've been on BookTube and all the years that I've been on Goodreads and list all the series from all those years. So the way that I do that is I go on Goodreads, scroll through my past reading challenges. Whenever you do a reading challenge on Goodreads, it logs all the book you have in this really nice format of all the book covers. And to me, like visually, it's very appealing and it's also very easy to see what I've read, remember the books that I've read, think about the books. So this is a tool that I use all the time when I'm going through books. This is like an added function that people don't think about when they're thinking about doing their challenge. I went through, starting at 2020, went through every single book on those lists to see what books were in series, and then I made a big long list. A few of these are completed, but most of them are incomplete, and I am in the middle of 67 series. If we talked about every series in depth, it would be super long. We're not going to do that. I'm going to just blow through the series. I wrote them all down, wrote down whether they were a series that I had completed, they were a series that I wanted to complete, they were a series that I was not going to continue, etc., etc. Here we go. Unsurprisingly, the first book on that big long list of books is the Adam Dalgliesh series. This series is by P.D. James and it started with Cover Her Face. I've been reading P.D. James for many, many years. P.D. James is one of my all-time favorite mystery writers and I really like the Adam Dalgliesh series. I've been reading the Adam Dalgliesh series all out of order, so I don't even know how many of them that I've read and how many I haven't. I have 3 or 4 more left to go before I finish the series. One of those is Devices and Desires. The next series that was on that list is Inspector Morse by Colin Dexter. I've actually completed this series. I read all the books on audio, mostly during my time on BookTube, but some prior to BookTube, and the problem with that is that I didn't realize that the audiobooks I had were abridged. Although this series is completed, although I've read all the books, I want to go back and reread the actual books, either physical or audio, but unabridged. Next is the Hannibal Lecter series, which is famous for its second book in the series, Silence of the Lambs. I started reading this my first year on BookTube, I believe, and I've only read the first 2 books. I do have the second 2 books in the series, so I definitely plan on completing this. This is one that, because there's only 2 books left, it might be nice to try and continue on maybe early in 2024 so that I can get through it throughout the year and finish up this series. I started reading the Day World series by Philip Jose Farmer. This is a classic sci-fi series and I have read 2 of the books for that. There's 1 book and 1 novella left that I have to read. I have the 3rd book, but I don't have the novella, so this would be a good one. If I can get the novella, I could just work on finishing that one. Howl's Moving Castle I read, which has 3 books, and I don't know if they're an actual series or like companion novels with some of the same characters. This one is definitely like not a priority for me, but it is one that if I come across the other books, I would read them. So maybe we should make a priority list at the end of this video, what my kind of top ranking priorities to finish would be. Jeeves and Wooster by P.G. Wodehouse is one that I've read in and out my whole life. I love Jeeves and Wooster. I always really liked the show with Fry and Laurie, and I definitely will read these when I have them. I have a few of them right now that I could be reading, but this is not a priority series for me. Next is the Inspector Thanet series by Dorothy Simpson. I started reading this one either right when I started BookTube or right before I started BookTube, and this is just like a classic British country crime series that I really enjoy. I think I've read 2 or 3 of the books, and I have 2 or 3 more, but I think there's quite a few more in the series. I started reading this series out of order, but now that I have a few books, I just try to read the earliest book first. A lot of the series that I'm in the middle of are like that. Only occasionally are there series that I try to pick up in order, and we'll see those as we go along. So I do want to continue with the Inspector Thanet series, but it's not that it's not a priority for me, but it's not a priority for me, if that makes sense. So it's kind of in the middle. Next is Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. This is another one that there are 2 books left in this series that I haven't read. I've only only read Something Wicked This Way Comes, which I think is actually falls in the middle of this trilogy, but they're not exactly a series. They're more companion books. I would pick up more of Ray Bradbury's works in this companion series when I find them. It would just happen if I found them similar to Howl's Moving Castle. I read Long-Legged Fly by James Sallis, which is the first in the Lou Griffin novels, and I really like this book, but I had a lot of issues with it. These books are written by a white man featuring a black man. The black man, Lou Griffin, is the main character, and there were just some things about this, the way that it was written, that I felt uncomfortable with. It was written in the 90s, so, you know, there's something to be said for that, I guess. But this is one that I would really like to read the second book to see if this is a series that I would like to continue. But getting that second book, again, isn't really a priority for me. The Borrowers is a series that I read when I was a child, and I think I probably read all of the books in the series. But a few years ago when I first started BookTube, I reread the first book because I was like craving reading it. And since then, I've been picking up other books in the series by Mary Norton, but this one definitely isn't a priority for me. I have several of the books and I could read them when I want to, so when I get the urge, I'll pick them up, but I will continue to pick up the books when I see them. I've been working my way through the Miss Marple series in order since I first started BookTube, and I love these books. I love Agatha Christie. I only read my first Agatha Christie since joining BookTube. No, that's not true. I read my first Agatha Christie right before I started BookTube, and I've been really enjoying reading the Miss Marple books, especially reading them in order. We'll see some other Agatha Christie books come up later. Miss Marple is one of those series that I try to pick up a couple times a year. I think I have 4 or 5 left in the series. Again, it's another one that's not a priority, but not a priority. So I read one of the Sherlock Holmes novels written by Anthony Horowitz. I think these are not the officially endorsed Sherlock Holmes novels by the Arthur Conan Doyle estate, but these are like okayed by the estate. I think the official ones are written by a female author. Anthony Horowitz wrote 3 Sherlock Holmes novels. I've read one of them. I would read the other 2, but it's definitely not a priority. Who knows when I'll ever get to them. I read Dune for the first time in 2020, and I love that book. I thought it was fantastic. I actually started reading the second book in that series pretty soon after I read Dune, but I just couldn't get into it. I was reading it with my husband on audio, and we just kind of fell off reading it and never got back into it. And I don't think that he's super interested in reading or rereading for him the Dune series. So that's one that I would like to continue, but I don't think I'll read the whole series. I think I would probably only read like maybe the first 3 books, and then I would see how I felt, but I don't think I'll be reading the entire Dune universe. Another series that I completed since I've been on BookTube is the Claire DeWitt mystery series by Sarah Gran. There are 3 books in this series, and I started reading them a long time ago when I lived in Brooklyn. Finished the last one in 2020, and I really enjoyed that series. I recently got the first in the series again to reread that series. It's not a huge priority for me to reread it, but I would like to get to it at some point, probably in 2024. Another series, a duology by Anthony Horowitz, is The Magpie Murders, Susan Ryland Mysteries. I liked The Magpie Murders a lot. It has a book within a book. It's a spoof on Poirot. I would like to get to the second in the series. I read The Big Sleep. Since starting BookTube, this is the first Raymond Chandler book I've ever read, and this is the Philip Marlowe series. This is a noir series. I really loved The Big Sleep. I thought it was fantastic. Definitely dated, definitely racist, definitely problematic, but for what it was, I really enjoyed it, and I would love to continue with the series, but it is not a priority. In 2021, I read The Murder of Molly Southbourne. This is a trilogy by Todd A. Thompson, and I love that book. It blew my mind. It was one of my top 3 favorite books for that year. There are 2 books less in this series, and I would love to get it. This one is not a huge priority, but when I find the books, I'll definitely be reading them. I love the TV show Red Dwarf, so when I found out there were books that were written by the creators under the name Grant Naylor, I wanted to pick it up. I looked for it online. The first one is titled Red Dwarf, and it was crazy expensive, and then I happened to have it in my basement box books. So I've read the first book in this series. I have the second book in the series somewhere somewhere. I would like to get to that one, and then there are 2 more books after that. I definitely want to read this series, but it follows the TV show very, very closely, so this one's not a huge priority for me because there's not a lot of like mystery that I need to get to with it. My dad gave me the first in the Parker series by Richard Starkey, who is a pseudonym for Donald Westlake. This is a newer noir. I think it was written in the 80s and 90s noir series that's supposed to like emulate Raymond Chandler and Jim Thompson, people like that. I didn't love this first book, but this is one that if I found more Parker books, I would definitely give them a try. I have seen these books on audio, so if I do ever get the urge, I probably could just read them on audio. I started reading Fletch, and I've read 2 books in the Fletch series, and I've picked up a bunch more, so I think I have 3 or 4 more in the series, and there's probably 7 or 8 in the series total. This is a very silly 80s investigative reporter series, famously made into a movie with Chevy Chase, which is very good and funny and silly. Very dated though. Definitely got some problematic elements. So I definitely want to continue with the series. It is not on my high priority list. I read The Society of S, which is part of the Ethical Vampire series by Susan Hubbard. This is a YA series. There's 2 more books in this trilogy, but the first one was not very good, so this is one that I am not going to be continuing. Next, we're at the Skip Langdon series. These are by Julie Smith, and they're all about Skip Langdon, who is an officer of the NOLA PD, so they're all set in New Orleans. I love this series. I've read 2 or 3 a year since I discovered it in 2021, and I'll keep doing so until I get to the end of the series. I think I don't have any more books currently, so I'm always keeping my eyes out for them, and I think the last 2 or 3 books were self-published, so I would have to probably get those off of Amazon eventually. I read An Absolute Remarkable Thing by Hank Green, which is part of a duology, and I liked this book, but I found it super annoying actually, and so I will not be continuing on with the second book. I read Call Me By Your Name by Andre Aciman. This has a sequel, and I would say that this is part of a series even though it's like literary, but the sequel caused such a terrible reaction and people were so mad about it. Although Call Me By Your Name is controversial, I enjoyed this book, but I don't think it needed a sequel, and I will not be continuing with that one. In 2021, I started the Jersey Shore Mystery series, which is by Beth Sherman and takes place in the town next to mine, and quickly fell in love with this, even though it's a pretty silly and hokey, cozy mystery series. I'm definitely planning on continuing that. I've read 2 of the books. I have 1 other one, and then there are 2 more in the series, so I'm hoping to read all of those. I can't remember if it was 2021 or 2022 that I started reading the Heartstopper series by Alice Oseman. This is a series of graphic novels. They're BookTube darlings. Everyone on BookTube loves them. I have 1 more book in this series, and I definitely will be continuing that. I think that would definitely be a priority because there's only 1 book left. I started reading the Binti series by Nnedi Okorafor. Besides some short stories, this is the only thing that I've read by Nnedi Okorafor. I read the first in the series. It's a trilogy, so there are 2 more books that I have to read. I've found them on audio, so I think that this could be considered a priority, and I can try and finish that in 2024. Similar to Nnedi Okorafor, I've only read short stories by N.K. Jemisin and The City We Became, which is, I think, a duology and could possibly be a trilogy. I loved The City We Became. I thought it was awesome, and I definitely want to find the next book in the series and finish that duology. And there's also a short story that I'd like to read, so I feel like the short story is definitely a priority because that you can read on Tor.com, but finding the book is going to be the hard part of finishing this series for me. I've started rereading the Tales of the City series by Amistad Maupin, and I've read 3 books in that series, and now I've reread 3 books in that series, but I have 4 of the 7 other books in that series, so that is a series that I would love to continue. It's not a priority for me because I have all the books and because I've read them before, but they're a great series to slide in with your reading because they're mostly like very campy, very silly, very fun, and happy books. Sad things happen in them, but they're a great way to break up like depressing reading. I read Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi in 2022, and I liked it. There are now 3 other books in that series at least, and I think it's ongoing, but I don't plan on continuing that. I enjoyed the first book, but I feel like that's enough for me. Another completed series is, well, it's a duology, is Franny the Queen of Provincetown. This is 2 very short novellas by John Preston that were written in the 80s about Franny, who is a drag queen who moves to Provincetown, Rhode Island. Nope, Provincetown, Massachusetts. I love these books. I've read both of them, but Franny the Queen of Provincetown is on this list because it is probably one that I will continue to reread every year or every few years. I love it so much. If you're looking for a heartwarming, happy, gay book, this is a great one, and another great book to break up depressing books. The second in the duology, which is actually an uncompleted work, not so much, but stick with the first book. Oh, getting on to some series that I love and I'm definitely going to continue. I have the Lord Peter Wimsey series by Dorothy L. Sayers. I've read 3 in this series, and I just pick up these books all the time. Dorothy L. Sayers is a queen of crime. She's a contemporary of Agatha Christie, and I really like the Lord Peter Wimsey stories. I have never actually read the first of the Lord Peter Wimsey books, and I would love to get my hands on that eventually. Those are definitely not a priority for me, but I will read a few a year. The Well Met series, it probably has a different name. Maybe it's something to do with the Ren Fair that they work for, but this is a series about a group of people who work at a Ren Fair every year by Jen DeLuca, and I loved Well Met. It was my favorite romance that I read the year that I read it, but I read the second one the next year and I hated the second one. There's 2 more books in the series so far, and I'm really hoping to get to them, and I hope they redeem the second book. These are not a priority though, because I don't own the books and who knows when I'll find them. I read A Death in Venice, which is part of the Lieberman Papers ongoing series by Frank Tallis. This one, I only read the first one. It was very long. I enjoyed it, but it's not one that I'm going to seek out or continue. So this one is one that I might not read anymore in the series at all. Next is The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. I've read the first 3 books in this series. It's ongoing, and I recently found the 4th book in a little free library. My dad and our friend Marilyn are reading this as well, so I'm going to pass this book along to them first, let them read it, and then I will read it after them. So I'll probably end up reading it sometime in 2024, and I know that Richard Osman has a fairly long book deal, so we'll be getting more Thursday Murder Club books for sure. So priority? Sure, we'll call it a priority. I read the independently published first book in a series by Lee Strauss. It's called the Ginger Gold series. This was Murder on the SS Rosa. A for effort, but I don't think I'll be continuing with this series. I read the first 2 books in the Lore Olympus series by Australian author Rachel Smythe. This is a graphic novel series, and it is a Hades and Persephone retelling. I really like the first 2 books. I was reading these free online, so I think the 3rd book is already out free online, but I have not looked to find it. Same with Heartstopper, actually. You can read Heartstopper free online. Those are both books that I would like to continue on with. A duology that I've read the first book of and that has scarred me is The Women of Brewster Place by Gloria Naylor. This is literary contemporary fiction from like the 80s. I do own and want to get to the second in the duology, The Men of Brewster Place, so I do think this should be a priority read. If only maybe to get it over with so that I can start healing. I read Pet by Akwaeke Emezi. I really enjoyed that young adult novel, and there's a prequel in that series. I don't know if the series is going to be ongoing, but I would love to read the prequel Bitter. Unfortunately, I don't have it, so this is not really a priority read for me. Next is the Three Pines series by Louise Penny. I read the first book, Still Life, last year, I believe, and I really enjoyed it. I got the second in the series, and this is one that I would like to read in order. This is an ongoing series with like more than 25 books, so it will take me a while to get through this. So to me, it doesn't really feel like a priority read, but I do have the second one whenever I feel ready to read it. I read 2 books for a mystery reading vlog. One was the first book in the Amory Ames novels by Ashley Weaver. This is a cozy mystery series set in the 20s. I thought the first book was okay. I definitely will not be continuing with the series. And similarly from that vlog, I read Maisie Dobbs by Jacqueline Woodson. Is that her name? Jacqueline Woodson? That doesn't sound right. Anyway, Maisie Dobbs, another long ongoing series and another one I will not be continuing with. I've started reading the Roderick Allen series by Ngaio Marsh. This are classic, again, Golden Age mysteries. Ngaio Marsh is a queen of crime, a contemporary of Dorothy L. Sayers and Agatha Christie, and I don't love her books as much. I've read 2 Roderick Allen mysteries. They're not my favorite, but I have picked up a bunch of other books by her, so I will be continuing to read those as I want to. I started rereading The Vampire Chronicles by Anne Rice. I have previously read many of these books. I couldn't even remember to tell you how many, and I reread Interview with a Vampire last year. I really enjoyed it, so I would like to move on and read The Vampire Lestat, which is the second in the long-running series, but it's not a priority. I would love to get my hands on more of the Will Darling series. There's 2 books and 2 novellas that go along with this series that I have not yet read. I read the first book and I really liked it. It is a espionage, cozy mystery, queer, sexy romance by KJ Charles. I would love to find more of the books in that series, but since I haven't, unfortunately, it is not a priority. I started reading the Murderbot series, and I've been trying to read that fairly quickly because there's a lot of books in the series. Martha Wells keeps writing more, and they're very episodic. The first few books are novellas, then there's a full-length novel, then there's a couple more novellas, and then there's another full-length novel that recently came out in 2023. So I think this should be a priority to at least get caught up in the series so that I can kind of read them as they come out so that I don't forget what's happening. When I was young, I read, I think, the entire Cat Who series. It's like 30 books or something. I read the vast majority of them, if not all of them, but last year for my Cat Cozy Mystery vlog, I went back and read the first in the series. So I've picked up the second in the series, The Cat Who Ate Danish Modern. I vaguely remember this being my favorite in the series when I read it when I was a teenager. So I'm super excited to get back into these books, but since I've been reading them for Cat Cozy Mystery vlogs, I haven't gotten to the second one yet. I can't quite make it a priority because of all the other Cat Cozy Mysteries I need to work on. For that same first Cat Cozy Mystery vlog, I also read Catnap by Carol Nelson Douglas, which is the first in the Midnight Louis series, which is partly narrated by Midnight Louis himself, a black cat living in Las Vegas. This is a series that if I found more in the series, I would definitely pick them up, but they're not a priority. I thought this was an interesting cozy mystery series, and I will leave the vlog where I read this and the Cat Who book linked down below. Another series that I will not be continuing 100% is the X-Hex series by Erin Sterling, aka Rachel Hawkins. I really didn't like the X-Hex, and I definitely don't plan on continuing with this series. Another Cat Cozy Mystery series that I really don't plan on continuing with is Cat About Town by Kate Conti. I read this for a different Cat Cozy Mystery vlog. I will have those linked down below, and I didn't really like this one. I didn't think it was very well written. I think any of the books in the Cat Cozy Mystery series that I've been reading, I would pick them up if I saw them and give the author another shot, but this was my least favorite so far. So I'm not going to be seeking out any more of that series. Next is Tana French's The Dublin Murder Squad series, the first book of which, called Into the Woods, I read earlier this year. I really loved it. It's an almost 500-page book, and I read it in like one day, flew through it. I really enjoyed it, and I did pick up the second in the series, The Likeness, so I do have that one to read. I kind of feel like that should be a priority just because I feel like I don't want to lose the momentum of that series by reading them years and years apart. This is a controversial one. So I read the first Detective Ellen Warner series earlier this year. It's called The Sanatorium, and I hated it. I thought it was terrible. It's probably the worst book that I've read all year, but I think I'd read the second book. I think I'd read the second book and see if her writing or the character development or anything about the book got any better. So far, there's only one other book in that series. Another Golden Age mystery series is the Henry Ben Colin series by John Dickinson Carr. I read the first one in this series earlier this year. I liked it. It was a very interesting locked room mystery, so I would definitely want to read more by John Dickinson Carr. I actually got another book of his recently that's not in that series that I would like to read, but I would definitely read more in the series as well. Not a priority though. A series that I would love to get my hands on, and I would definitely make a priority if I had more of the books, is the Detective Robert Cho series. I read the first of this series earlier this year. It's by Ed Lin, and it follows Detective Robert Cho, a police officer in the NYPD when we first meet him, and he's working in Chinatown. Of course, they put the only Chinese police detective that they have on the force in Chinatown, and it's all about his life. I would love to read more in that series. Another book series that if I saw them, I would pick them up is the Duffy House mystery series. This is by Crab Evers, who is actually a sports writer. All these books follow like sports related crimes. The Magical Cat series, this was another cat cozy mystery series that I started this year by Sophie Kelly. Sophie Kelly has a lot of different cat mystery series, I think, but I really did enjoy this one, so I would definitely continue with the series. Not a priority, one that I would just read as I find the book. The Tommy and Tuppence series by Agatha Christie. I said in the beginning that we would come back to Agatha Christie. This is a series of 5 books. I read the first book in the series last year for Cloak and Dagger Christmas, or was it March Mystery Madness? And I really enjoyed it, so I will definitely be continuing on with this series. I think though I would finish reading the Miss Marple series first and then come back to this one. The one that I really love actually is the Nurse Hilda Adams series by Mary Roberts Reinhardt. I've read 2 books in this series, and I think there are 3 more books, but one of them might be a short story. This is another series that's hard to tell. They're not well noted on Goodreads how many books there are, but I think I have 2 more books and 1 short story to go, so I would love to continue on with this series. Another series that I completed this year that it's rumored there might be a 4th is the Southern Reach series by Jeff Vandermeer. I would definitely read a 4th book in this series, and I would love to reread this series like in quick succession now that I've read them all separately. So this is one that goes on the reread pile, but not a priority. Another series that I don't plan on continuing, but if I happen to find another book in, is the Music City Quartet. It's a series of 4 books by Ray Celestine. I read the first called The Axeman, which took place in New Orleans. I read it because it took place in New Orleans. There were some interesting characters in that book, and so like I'm not wholly opposed to continuing that series, but I'm definitely not seeking it out. Similarly, I would not seek out the Witches of Litchford series by Paul Cornell. This one was okay. It's a series of novellas, so like I love a novella. If I found another one of the books, I would pick it up, but I'm not looking for them. A book that I would love to get is the second from the Darius the Great Is Not Okay duology by Adib Karim. I cried so much at that young adult queer coming of age story. I would love to read more about Darius and how he grows up, so I would love to get my hands on the second book. Next is a priority read, so that would be the second in the Girl from the Well duology by Rin Shepeko. I read the first in the series, The Girl from the Well, earlier this year, and I really liked it. I have a physical copy of that book, but I read it on audio, and I recently saw a audio copy of the second book. I think I will listen to that one on audio and complete that series, so it's definitely a priority for me. A new series that I can't wait to get more of, but I think I'm going to have to purchase new, which is very unlike me, is the Lost and Found in Harlem series by Delia C. Pitts. She is a New Jersey author writing modern day noir, and I read the first book a couple of months ago. I loved it, so I would love to get more of the books in that series. Okay, we're getting to very recent books now. I read the first in the Kill File duology by Christopher Farnsworth. I liked it okay. I would definitely read the second in this duology, but it's not a priority. I'm not keeping my eye out for it. Coming up to the very last books that I've most recently read, I read the first in the Ivy Nichols mystery series by Audrey Cohen. This is Murder at the Hotel 1911, and so far it's only a duology. The whole time reading this book, I thought I would not want to read the series or continue on with the series, but right at the end there was a cliffhanger, so I would definitely read the second in this duology when I can find it. This might be one that I might have to like seek out and find just to find out what happens, just to finish it up. Lastly, the most recent series that I started was Nairobi Heat by Mukoma Wanyugi. This is a semi-noir cop detective goes to Africa to have his own detective agency series that I really enjoyed the first book. When I bought this at a used book sale, I did buy the second in the series as well. This is a weird one though, because if you look at Goodreads, this isn't listed as a series, but it absolutely is a series following all the same detectives. If you know how many books are in the series and if you know the chronological order of the series, I would love to know because I'm just piecing it together by when they were written. So those are all the 67 series that I'm either currently in the middle of or have completed but want to reread since joining BookTube. That is a lot of series. That's a lot to think about. Now I have a little priority list that I can work off of. I definitely want to prioritize series that I can cross off of this list and get over with. So maybe we'll do a vlog or something like that where I read some of those series and cross them off and bring down my series TBR. Let me know what your favorite mystery series is because those are my favorite kinds of series and those are my favorite genre of books. Let me know if you've read any of the books on this list. Let me know what you thought of them. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!